Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the service today. A special welcome to those of you who are watching online. We have a very special offer for those of you who are watching online today. If you haven't yet shoveled out your driveway, Pastor John has volunteered that if you reach out to him, he will come and personally do it himself. And he's an artist. He's not going to use one of these fancy big machines. He's got a very small shovel, and he would like to come and do it. So, John, we just thank you for your ongoing generosity to people in difficult times. So thank you. Philip Yancy is a Christian author who oftentimes is willing to talk about subjects maybe other authors or Christians aren't willing to speak about. He writes books like Disappointment with God and Where is God When It Hurts? Topics that maybe sometimes we're uncomfortable even raising. He likes to dive right into them. In his book, The Jesus I Never Knew, he tells a story about sitting in O'Hare Airport in Chicago, and his flight is delayed for 5 hours. If you have ever been delayed in an airport waiting for a flight, you know how much fun that is. He was on his way to a Christian conference where he was going to be one of the guest speakers. So while he's in the airport for 5 hours, he strikes up a conversation with an older lady who's there going to the same conference, and they get visiting. During their time, they get into some pretty deep conversations. They talk about their dysfunctional childhoods. They talk about their frustrations with local church and their questions about faith. Does this sound like an exciting conversation for you? During this time, Yancy was working on a manuscript for his book, Disappointment with God, where he'd spent a fair amount of time meeting with Christians who were discouraged, had gone through a lot of suffering and difficulty, and had a lot of unanswered prayers. And Yancy says, "My companion listened to my melancholy and my angst for a long time, and then out of nowhere asked me a question." I'll pause the story here for a second. Imagine you are having coffee this week with someone who's got lots of melancholy and angst and disappointment, and you get to ask them one question. Do you know what question you would ask them? Here's the question this older lady asked Philip. She said, "Philip, do you ever just let God love you? Do you ever just let God love you?" It's pretty important, I think. Yancy says he was so startled by this question, and that she brought a light into a gaping hole in his spiritual life with this question. That for all of my obsession about the Christian faith, I'd missed the most important message of all. The story of Jesus is a story of the celebration of God's love. It involves pain and disappointment, yes, for God as well. But Jesus embodies a promise of a God who will go to the ends of the earth to win us back. Yancy says this question from this lady, "Will you just let God love you?" shone a light into his spiritual life. That in the midst of this revelation, he said, she brought light. Now, we use the phrase light very often in our own expressions in English. We say things like, "the lights came on for me," or "something came to light." Now, when we say this, we're not referring to a literal light. Rather, that there was a truth that was hidden, that's become clear to us now, that it has become revealed. Something that we could not see before, now we are able to see. Something that we were unaware of before, or maybe something that we had simply forgotten in time because things got difficult and our minds just got overwhelmed, suddenly became clear and visible to us. And we say, the lights came on. It came to light. This lady's question and Yancy's willingness to listen, to not be defensive, and his ability to reflect on this brought about a revelation to him. That yes, struggles and darkness are real, but so is God's love for us come to us in the person of Jesus Christ. Now, light is a major theme throughout the scriptures, and it's one of the main themes also that we read about in the Christmas story. And one of the favorite passages talking about light, Pastor John read for us before we prayed, and we're going to put it on the screen, and I would like you to join me out with your out loud voices. Don't sing it, just speak it. And join me in reading this verse together in whichever language you so choose. Would you join me? "The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned." Again, This is not a literal light that the prophet is talking about. There's a message. There is truth. There is good news that changed the way the hearers saw the world and now saw their lives in light of this truth. We see the same thing happens in the Christmas story. Let me read it for you from Luke's Gospel, chapter 2, verses 1 to 11. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor in Syria. And everyone went to their hometown to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and to the line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. And there were shepherds living in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. And an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of God shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you, and he is the Messiah, or Christ, the Lord." Now, if you lived in the first century and you heard this story read, what you would hear would be a military oppressor is forcing us to take an expensive trip while I'm pregnant, and I'm likely to give birth away from home in a shed out back with some animals. Why? So my overlords can raise my taxes. Meaning that the people in the first century, when they heard this story, they were living in a time of darkness and in a time that felt overwhelming. And it's in this time, it's in these circumstances that God shines his light. And the light is not a literal light. It is a message about the good news of Jesus coming to us in our circumstances. Now, in the epic battle between light and darkness, you realize light always wins, right? There's never been a time when you've entered in a dark room, turned on the light, and the darkness overpowered the light. The light always wins. On Christmas Eve, in this room, we will dim the lights. We will pass out candles to everybody, and we will pass the light around, candle to candle, throughout the room, and the light will win. And as we do that, we're not just trying to create a kind of nostalgic moment around Christmas. We're remembering the great truth that the light came in a time of darkness, in the person of Jesus Christ, and that when it did, the light wins. And again, when we think about the season that you and I are in, the Sunday before Christmas, when it feels like darkness is closing in, as things get difficult, we remember that in this season, Christ shines his light. And that light is the gift of Jesus to each and every one of us for each and every day. Now, this morning, it's my great privilege to share with you a story from Cynthia Shaw. Cynthia is a member of our congregation who went through a really dark season, and the Lord shone his light into her life, and we're going to watch it now. Just watch the screens. It's my privilege to introduce you today to Cynthia Shaw. Cynthia, thanks so much for being willing to join us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of whether you're from the city here or not, your career, your family, anything else you'd like to tell us.
All right. Well, as Rob said, I'm Cynthia Shaw, and I'm married to Bill. And we have three beautiful children, Kelly, Andrew, and Peter. And they are all married. They live in the city here, and we have 5 beautiful grandchildren. We have 2 girls and 3 boys. I've lived in St. John all my life, and I've been a member of Main Street / River Cross for 47 years. I'm a retired dental hygienist. I retired about 10 years ago, and before that, I worked with my husband, Bill.
Great, thanks. Now, a number of months ago, you got some difficult news. Would you mind sharing that with us?
No, I'd love to. It's about a year ago, a little over a year ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And when you first hear that word cancer, it takes a while to process. And during that time, I felt like I was very much alone in that decision. And I was dealing, I think, with a little bit of a depression. And I just felt scary. It was scary going through those first few weeks and months of this diagnosis until everything gets into place. I was afraid for my future.
Hmm. And then you had to go through all of your treatment during COVID times.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what that was like.
Well, my treatment started in January with surgery to remove the tumor. And then I had 3 weeks of healing before my chemotherapy started, which was the middle of February. And it was 16 treatments, and it took me until the first week of July. And then I had most of the summer off, which was really quite nice to kind of rid myself of the drugs and to start to feel a little healthier. Then I started 21 treatments of radiation in the month of September, and that finished up on October the 5th. And that, all those appointments, and with my weekly blood work, I did all those appointments by myself because it was during COVID. And I didn't know any different. And I had to get through it, and I had to try to stay strong. And you know what? I got through it, and I'm thankful for that now. But it was overwhelming, and there was some appointments that were really scary to experience on my own. But I have to say that the oncology department at the hospital was wonderful, and they're a great community of people, and their priority is always your health and getting better and to cure you. And so that made it a little bit easier, but going through those things during COVID was difficult.
Sure. Now, a cancer diagnosis can be hard on all aspects of our life, including our faith. What were those first few weeks or months like after getting diagnosed?
Well, after I found the lump, and I was looking at a number of tests and biopsies and doctor's appointments, and really until my treatment was in place, it was very difficult for me. I really kind of felt like I was in a bit of a depression and despair, and wasn't sure how to get a head around it, but I was facing surgery and chemotherapy and radiation, and I still wasn't sure about my prognosis. So I was kind of facing death. And I felt alone, overwhelmed, and sick. So it was around that time that I started doing a daily devotion. I was desperate to find a way to deal with this. I did studies on anxiety and depression and fear, trying to find peace, trying to find hope. I was praying to God to remove this diagnosis from me or change it. I didn't know what to do. I was just really, really floundering. So at this time I was tired, and I was trying to stay focused on getting through these treatments. And I really didn't know how to pray. And that's when God came to me. That's when He came to me and met me on the road. My prognosis changed, or my prognosis was good, and my test results came back clear. There was no spread of cancer, and I started to feel like there was some good news in this process. God had taken me by the hand, and He had helped me to reevaluate my attitude. I stopped praying that my diagnosis would be different, and I was able to meet it face on, and I felt an amazing strength to embrace the cancer and say, you know what, I'm going to beat this. Mm-hmm. Wow. So, from that time on, I wanted God to use me in whatever way He could, because I was just so thankful that I felt this positive attitude fill my body. Mm-hmm. And during chemo, for 16 treatments in 5 months, I was never once nauseated. I wasn't sick. I never spent a day in bed. I walked 5K every afternoon. I ate well, and I drank lots of water. And that's when I knew God was carrying me through this.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's wonderful. Now, you and I visited last week, I believe it was, and it was clear to me that time of despair that you've you've moved past that, at least generally speaking. Tell us a little bit about what life is like for you right now and kind of your attitude going forward.
Well, through the treatments and since, I have experienced a tremendous amount of joy in my life. I give thanks every day for God using this adversity to get my attention and to show me his promises and his blessings. I am so grateful for the power of prayer, because family and friends lifted me up during that time, and I felt every one of them. It made a huge difference in how I was able to walk into the hospital and face those appointments. I got excited every time I had an appointment or a treatment, because it gave me the opportunity to share my faith, share about God's blessings with the staff and with other patients. It was amazing. Rob, I can honestly say that this new attitude and this Christian walk has been such a blessing. And I thank God daily for the journey that I've gone through in the last 12 months. You know what? I wouldn't change it for anything.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. I realize that this is going to be a blessing to a lot of people. We appreciate your opening your heart and just the experience of God's faithfulness and the way you shared that with us today. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're most welcome.
Would you join me in thanking Cynthia for sharing her story with us today? Thank you, Cynthia. One of the lines that stands out to me in her story was when she said, "I was too tired and too depressed to reach out to God, but he came and found me." This is the story of Advent. It's the story of Christmas, that in our darkness, God comes to us. On those living in a land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. And that light, again, is not a literal light. It is God coming to us and giving us what we need for the season that we're in. And when this happens, when we see this light, when a truth that maybe was hidden before comes to light and we see God and we recognize he's there, it gives us confidence that we can find our way through the dark times, that God is here. He is speaking, he's leading, he's providing, and I see it now. The light has come. Before, maybe all we could see was darkness or frustrations or the craziness of this season, and it was too much. But a light has dawned, and now I see that God is going to do what he wants to do. He's going to give us what he wants to give us. He's going to lead us and guide us, comfort us, and challenge us. And the darkness does not win, because Christ is here, and he's come for us. And as Cynthia said so profoundly at the end of her interview, that what she learned about God through this experience, the revelation that had come to her during her journey with cancer, was so valuable that she would not change a thing. Advent is our time to shift our attention and our focus away from news, numbers, commentary, and predictions, and instead enter into this prayerful season of expectation, a holy time of waiting where God speaks his light and shines his light into our lives. When Isaiah made his pronouncement, things were dark, and God gave a revelation that changed their hearts. When the angels were giving their message to the shepherds, the times were dark, but God gives his revelation, and it changed their hearts. And for you and I today, things may seem dark and challenging, but we remember that Christ has come for such a time as this, and will walk with us each step of the way through this season. We're going to invite the team to come back up. And as we close our time of this message here today, I just want to lead you in a time of prayer and prepare us for the closing song, which I'll invite you to stand to sing or stand to enjoy when the time comes. But as we come to prayer today, I want to come back to the question this lady asked Philip at the beginning of the message. Do you ever just let God love you? That this is our season of opportunity to take time to turn towards the sun and experience the warmth of the love of God and let our hearts unfold like flowers before him. To spend time and to just be in his presence and let our hearts receive its King. Let us pray. Lord, today we ask that you would shine your light into our darkness. Help us to see your peace, which is so often hidden by our focus on all our frustrations. Help us to see your grace that our tired eyes have missed. Help us to see you present, willingly available to us in each day this week, that we can enter this week totally trusting you for everything we need. And now, Lord, as we close our service in song, we ask, Lord, that we would just experience your love and mercy in our lives. And we pray this in your name.